Hello, everybody. Miss Megan here. This week, can you guess what we might be talking about? I've got my beautiful princess dress on. Fairy tales. I love fairy tales. Do you know what a fairy tale is? Well, fairy tales are normally they start like once upon a time or long, long ago in a faraway land. They're made up stories, right? A lot of times the characters are kings and queens or princes or princesses, or they might have magic in them, maybe a fairy godmother or a magic carpet or magic beans that you plant in the ground. Fairy tales love to have magic in them. They normally have good characters and then they have bad characters, and normally it's really easy to tell the difference. Sometimes they even have talking animals or animals that do things that they don't normally do. Like, I love Aladdin, and Aladdin's a fairy tale. Genie's magic. You've got good guys like Aladdin and Jasmine, and bad ones like Jafar. You've got a magic carpet. And then you have Abu and Raja. Did they act like normal animals? Nope, that's why it's a fairy tale. Sometimes they have very unusual names. Like I've never heard somebody named Aurora or Cinderella, right? Or Rumpelstiltskin. Sometimes they have silly names or unusual names. And they often have happy endings, like they lived happily ever after. I have a new fairy tale for you. So, while you're at home today, maybe you can dress up as one of your favorite fairy tale characters. Maybe it's a favorite princess or a prince, or maybe it's an animal like the big bad wolf or the three little pigs. All right, see if you dress up as your favorite fairy tale. Maybe you can even put on like a little play at home and retell it. But I have a story for you today. The one I'm going to read is about the princess and the pea. But I'm going to read it from Arthur's really helpful bedtime stories. So there's some of our favorite fairy tales, but Arthur and his friends are the characters. So they've changed it just a little. So I'm going to show you this. So this is the front cover, and then this is the back cover. And then this is the spine of the book, right? We were going to talk about our parts of the book. The front cover tells us the title, the name of the story, and it also tells us the author and the illustrator. Well, Mark Brown is the author and the illustrator of the Arthur books, but there's another special page in this book, and I'm going to show it to you. This is called the Table of Contents. This book has lots of different stories in it. So if I'm wanting to just read one story, I can go to the table of contents and I can find what page it starts on. Well, I said our story was about the princess and the pea, so I need to look and see. We've got Little Red Riding Hood and Buster and the Beanstalk, the Emperor's New Clothes, DW and the Three Bears, the Tortoise and the Hare, the Princess and the Pea, and it tells me it starts on page 28. The table of contents can help me find different parts of a story. So I'm going to turn to page 28. Now, like I said, this fairy tale has been changed a little bit, and the names have changed to be Arthur's friends. But I'm going to read to you The Princess and the Pea. There was once a prince who was eager to fall in love, but being a prince, he had to fall in love with a princess. So his parents introduced him to princesses from lands near and far. There were short princesses and tall ones, thin ones and fat ones. There were even a few so overdressed it was hard to know what they really looked like at all. One night, during a terrible storm, the prince was having dinner with his parents at their castle. "I'm afraid we're running out of princesses," noted the king. "We mustn't give up hope," the queen insisted. The prince just sighed, pushing the food around on his plate. After dinner there was a loud pounding at the castle door, and a young woman was brought in. She was splashed with mud, and her dripping clothing made puddles on the floor. "Good evening, your majesty," she said, shaking rain from her hair. "I'm Princess Francine. Thanks for letting me in." The prince could hardly believe his eyes. He had never seen such a bedraggled princess before. What do you think bedraggled means? Is she dressed like a normal princess? The king and queen were also surprised. What great need made you travel on such a night? The king asked. Nothing special, the princess exclaimed. I just recently arrived in your kingdom and I thought I'd go out for a ride. Even in a storm? Asked the queen. Princess Francine shrugged. A little rain doesn't bother me, but the thunder spooked my horse and she threw me. I'll find her in the morning. The prince didn't know what to think. Here was a brave and resourceful princess unlike any he had met before. The queen knew her son well and could see the look that he had come over his face. But what did they really know of Francine? They had to find out if she was really a princess. And for that, the queen had a plan. Come on, she said to Francine. Let's get you into some dry clothing and find you a room. While Francine was changing, the queen had 20 mattresses piled on a bed, and under the bottom one she placed a single pea. When Francine arrived in her bedroom, she was impressed. That's quite a bed, she said, looking up. Luckily, I'm not afraid of heights. And ignoring the ladder, she scrambled up the mattress and settled in. Sleep well, said the queen, closing the door behind her. If she's really a princess, we'll know soon enough, she said to herself. The next morning, Francine met the royal family at breakfast. How are you feeling this morning? The queen asked. Francine yawned. I hardly slept at all. I kept feeling as if I was laying on a sharp rock. I even turned black and blue. The queen smiled. Only a true princess could have felt the pea through a 20 king-size mattresses. The prince was delighted too, and began spending as much time as possible with Francine. Soon they were both in love with each other, and after the prince and princess were married, they continued to sleep on 20 mattresses because Francine liked the view. The prince removed the pea, though, so that they could sleep happily ever after. What a silly story. Can you imagine sleeping on 20 mattresses and then through all of that finding a tiny little pea? What do you think? Fairy tale? Let's see. So we said a fairy tale is set in a faraway land, and that it normally this story didn't contain magic, but it was definitely not a normal day for a prince or a young lady, right? They had unusual names. Francine is not an unusual name. In our normal fairy tales, sometimes they do. Did it have a happy ending? It did. Fairy tales are just made up stories, and sometimes they have lessons for us to learn, and sometimes they're just entertaining. So, The Princess and the Pea was one that was just entertaining. So, this week we're going to go explore some different fairy tales. What's one of your favorite fairy tales? On our slides, you will find some activities that go with the story. When I saw all those mattresses and how they were stacked on top of each other, it made me think of patterns. Do you remember we talked about patterns, how they repeat themselves? I could have red, green, red, green, red, then green. There's an activity on there for you to create your own patterns, kind of like the patterns on the mattress, that they were one on top of the other. Check it out with some of the other activities posted online. See you soon.